The grocery store is a lie of convenience, a temple built on the assumption that you cannot survive without a massive supply chain. We've been conditioned to believe that if you don't own an acre of fertile land, you are a spectator in the art of staying fed. But look at your balcony, your driveway, or that dusty corner of your garage. You are standing on a potential gold mine of calories, hidden inside a 5-gallon plastic bucket. Most people see a bucket and see a container for paint or trash. What they don't see is a self-contained biological engine that outproduces traditional gardens by nearly 400%. And the most shocking part, you can throw the dirt away. Soil is actually the most inefficient part of a garden. It's heavy, it harbors disease, and it's a chaotic middleman that steals nutrients before they ever reach the roots. But here, where it gets interesting. Meet Marcus. 2 years ago, Marcus lived on the 12th floor of a concrete high-rise with nothing but a 4-foot balcony and a growing sense of anxiety about rising food costs. He didn't have a green thumb, and he certainly didn't have a backyard. He started with 1 bucket and a dream of a single salad. Within 6 months, his balcony was producing so much kale, tomatoes, and peppers that he had to start giving them away to neighbors who couldn't understand where the farm was hidden. His secret wasn't a miracle fertilizer or a high-tech lab. It was a shift in how he viewed the anatomy of a plant. When you plant a seed in the ground, that plant spends 60% of its energy fighting the earth. It has to push through compacted clay, battle soil-borne pathogens, and stretch its roots for miles just to find a drink. What if you removed the struggle? Imagine a system where the plant never has to work a day in its life. Imagine its roots suspended in a perfect, oxygenated mist, where every single drop of water is saturated with the exact mineral profile the plant craves. This is the hidden world of the Kratky and Dutch bucket, hybrids methods so simple they feel like cheating. We are talking about a 10-minute setup that turns a plastic vessel into a high-speed assembly line for vegetables. But this raises a question. If it's this easy, why isn't everyone doing it? The answer is economic inertia. You can't easily monetize a system that requires a $5 bucket and a handful of clay pebbles. Big agriculture relies on the complexity of the struggle, the heavy machinery, the chemical pesticides, and the vast logistics of shipping a head of lettuce 3,000 miles. They need you to believe that growing food is hard. But gravity and chemistry don't care about the economy. In a bucket system, we use a process called passive hydroponics. You fill the bottom of the bucket with a nutrient-rich water solution and suspend the plant just above the surface. As the plant grows, it drinks the water, creating an ever-expanding air gap. Inside this gap, the plant develops air roots, specialized structures that breathe pure oxygen. This creates a biological turbocharger. While a garden plant is gasping for air in waterlogged soil, the bucket plant is hyperventilating oxygen and gorging on minerals. And that's not the full story. The water in this system doesn't evaporate into the ground. It stays locked in the reservoir. A bucket-grown tomato uses 90% less water than a field-grown one. You aren't just growing food, you're creating a closed-loop life support system that functions even in a drought. So how do you actually build this engine? It starts with a standard 5-gallon bucket and a lid. You drill a hole in the lid to fit a small plastic mesh cup. Instead of dirt, you fill that cup with inert stones, clay pebbles, or even crushed gravel just enough to hold the plant upright. You fill the bucket with water and a simple, water-soluble nutrient mix. You set the seedling in the cup, making sure the very bottom of the roots touch the water. Then you walk away. No weeding, no tilling, no bending over until your back breaks. The bucket does the work while you sleep. As the water level drops, the plant adapts. It's a set-it-and-forget-it miracle that feels almost illegal in its simplicity. But here is the moment of clarity. When you harvest your first bucket-grown cucumber, you'll notice something strange. It's heavier than the ones from the store. It's denser. That's because the plant never experienced a bad day. It never went thirsty. It never lacked for food. It is the peak expression of what that vegetable was meant to be. But there is a catch. Most people fail because they try to help the plant too much. They add too many chemicals, they move the buckets, or they get nervous when the water gets low. The hardest part of this system isn't the setup, it's the discipline of doing nothing. We have been taught that production requires labor. We've been told that to get something out of the earth, we must sweat and toil. But the bucket proves that the earth was just a container, and the toil was just an inefficiency. Think about the implications for a moment. If every apartment balcony in a city had 3 buckets, the entire urban food desert would vanish overnight. The limitations of the city, the shade, the concrete, the lack of space suddenly become irrelevant. The city isn't a desert, it's just an untapped farm waiting for containers. You don't need a revolution to change how you eat. You don't need a political movement or a massive bank account. You just need to stop looking at the ground and start looking at the empty plastic sitting in your garage. The realization is simple. You are only as dependent as you choose to be. The next time you walk through a grocery store, look at the produce section and realize you're looking at a museum of the past. The future isn't in the fields, it's in the small, quiet systems we build for ourselves. A bucket is just a bucket until you realize it's a key. And now that you know how the lock works, the only question left is how many keys you're willing to turn. If you're wondering which specific vegetables turn a single bucket into a 100-pound harvest, the answer lies in the geometry of the roots. To push this system to its absolute limit, you have to understand the vertical escalation. Most beginners stop at 1 bucket on the ground, but the true power of this method is that buckets can be stacked, hung, or tiered, turning a single square foot of floor space into a skyscraper of calories. When you transition from a single reservoir to a vertical Dutch bucket line, you aren't just gardening, you're building a biological machine. By connecting these buckets with a simple half-inch PVC pipe, you can automate the feeding of 50 plants from a single pump. This is the moment the hobby becomes a lifestyle. Imagine a wall of tomatoes 5 feet thick, fueled by a single reservoir that you only check once a week. But this brings us to the final, most important secret, the nutrient gap. The reason store-bought vegetables often taste like crunchy water isn't just because they were picked green, it's because they were grown in depleted soil. In your bucket, you control the mineral density. You are effectively flavor-tuning your food. By slightly increasing the potassium levels during the flowering stage, you can trigger a sugar-loading response in the plant that makes a homegrown cherry tomato taste like actual candy. The system is perfect, but it's also a mirror. It rewards precision and punishes over-interference. It's a return to a more honest form of production, one where the barrier to entry isn't wealth or land, but simply the curiosity to begin. You're now standing at the edge of a very deep rabbit hole. You know the physics, you understand the biology, and you have the blueprint for the hardware. The hidden truth is no longer hidden, it's just waiting to be built. The only thing standing between you and total food autonomy is a trip to the hardware store and 10 minutes of your time. If you're curious about which specific mineral blends turn a standard plant into a high-yield monster, there's a very specific, master blend, ratio that the pros don't usually talk about. The master blend ratio is the cheat code of the professional growing world, a precise 4-18-38 formula that sounds like dry chemistry but acts like rocket fuel. When you mix this specific sequence of nutrients with magnesium sulfate and calcium nitrate, you aren't just feeding a plant, you're unlocking its genetic potential. In the soil, a plant is a scavenger. In a bucket, it's an athlete on a curated diet. But here, where the logic takes a sharp turn, most people assume that more nutrients equal faster growth. That's the first mistake that kills a bucket garden. If the concentration is too high, the water can't enter the roots through osmosis, it actually gets sucked out of the plant, dehydrating it in a pool of water. It's a brutal irony, you can drown a plant in food. This brings us to the shadow phase of the setup. As your plants reach peak production, the bucket creates its own microclimate. The transpiration from the leaves increases the local humidity, and the root mass becomes so dense it begins to filter the water itself. You've created a living lung. But there's a final hurdle that stops most people from ever starting. We are socially conditioned to think that real food comes from the earth, and anything grown in a bucket is artificial. We feel a strange guilt for bypassing the struggle of the soil. Yet, when you look at the results, vines so heavy with fruit they require structural support, and leaves so green they look painted, the guilt evaporates. The economic reality is even more staggering. One bucket, properly managed, can produce 30 pounds of tomatoes in a single season. At grocery store prices, that bucket pays for itself in less than 3 weeks. And that's not the full story. The true value isn't the money you save, it's the bridge you've burned. Once you realize you can generate your own sustenance with a plastic container and some minerals, the fear of empty shelves starts to fade. You aren't just a consumer anymore, you're a producer. The setup is finished, the loops are closed, the only variable left in the equation is your own hesitation. You can continue to walk the aisles of the supermarket, paying for the inefficiency of a global supply chain, or you can go to your garage, find a bucket, and start the 10-minute clock. The transition from dependency to autonomy is surprisingly quiet. It sounds like the soft ripple of water in a plastic reservoir. The revolution doesn't require a field, it just requires a lid. If you're wondering how to keep this system running through a freezing winter or a blistering heat wave, the answer lies in the thermal mass of the water itself. Water is a thermal battery, a stabilizer that defies the erratic swings of the outside world. While soil temperatures can spike or plummet in hours, a 5-gallon reservoir of water possesses a thermal lag. It stays cool in the midday sun and holds onto the day's warmth long after the sun has set, shielding the roots from the shock that kills traditional garden plants. But here's the twist: the bucket doesn't just survive the elements, it can actually bypass them. Because the system is modular and soil-free, it is entirely portable. When the first frost of October threatens to kill a neighbor's entire garden, you simply pick up your buckets and move them into the kitchen or a heated garage. The plant doesn't even notice the transition. You've decoupled the life of the plant from the geography of the land. But this portability reveals a deeper realization. We have spent centuries trying to adapt ourselves to the environment, praying for rain, fighting the heat, mourning the frost. The bucket system flips the script. It allows us to adapt the environment to the plant. It is the ultimate expression of human ingenuity over biological limitation. But as you look at your row of buckets, you might feel a sudden, sharp curiosity. If a bucket can grow a tomato, what else can it do? Can it grow medicine? Can it grow enough to sustain a family during a total collapse of the grid? The answer is a resounding yes, but it requires one final shift in perspective. You have to stop seeing yourself as a gardener and start seeing yourself as a system administrator. You aren't just growing food, you are managing a flow of energy. And that's not the full story. The most profound moment in this journey isn't the first harvest or the money saved. It's the morning you walk out to your balcony and realize that the world feels a little less threatening. The hidden truth wasn't just about the buckets. It was about the fact that the tools for your independence were hiding in plain sight all along. The grocery store is still there, but its power over you is gone. You've built a life support system in a piece of plastic that most people throw away. You've mastered a cycle that uses less water, less space, and less effort than anything our ancestors could have imagined. The 10-minute setup is over, the growth has begun. True security isn't found in a crowded store or a digital bank account. It's found in the quiet, steady rhythm of a plant thriving in a world you created yourself. If you're ready to see how this simple bucket can be upgraded with a solar-powered air pump to double your growth speed again, the next step is purely a matter of physics. The physics of oxygenation is the final frontier of the bucket system, and it is where the passive method transforms into a powerhouse. When you introduce a solar-powered air stone into the reservoir, you are no longer relying on the plant's ability to find air. You are force-feeding oxygen directly to the root zone at the molecular level. This is known as deep water culture, DWC, and the results are almost unsettling. In a standard garden, roots are dense, brown and tough because they are adapted for survival. In an oxygen-enriched bucket, the roots turn a blinding, snowy white. They become soft and filamentous, increasing their surface area by thousands of %. This allows the plant to breathe under pressure, accelerating its metabolism to a point where you can almost see the growth happen in real time. But here, where it gets interesting. The solar panel on your windowsill doesn't just power a pump, it acts as a biological regulator. During the hottest parts of the day, when the sun is most intense and the plant is under the most stress, the pump runs at its highest speed. It provides the maximum amount of oxygen exactly when the plant's metabolic demand is at its peak. It is a perfect, self-regulating synchronicity between the sun, the machine, and the organism. Yet even with this supercharged setup, the system remains remarkably fragile in one specific way: the pH balance. Water is a sensitive medium. If the acidity of your bucket drifts too far in either direction, the minerals lock out. The food is right there, touching the roots, but the plant can't see it. It starves in the middle of a feast. That's not the full story, though. The hidden truth of the nutrient lockout is that it's the only way the system can fail you, and it's the easiest thing to fix. A single drop of lemon juice or a pinch of baking soda is often enough to reset the chemistry. It's a game of small adjustments that yield massive returns. We have been conditioned to think that high-tech food production requires a lab coat and a degree. But as you watch a solar-powered bubble break the surface of your nutrient solution, you realize that high-tech is just a fancy word for understanding how nature actually works when you remove the obstacles. You have moved from a person with a bucket to a person with a refinery. The transition is now complete. You have gone from the urban limitation of a concrete balcony to a high-density, oxygen-enriched, thermal-stabilized food production unit. You are no longer wondering if you can grow your own food. You are now calculating how much of the grocery store you can officially ignore. The realization is final. The system wasn't the bucket. The system was your willingness to look at a problem and see a solution that cost less than a lunch at a fast food joint. You are now the administrator of your own survival. The buckets are full, the sun is up, and the future is surprisingly green. Now that the hardware is solved, have you considered which high-calorie, staple crops can actually replace the grains in your pantry using this exact same setup? True independence is found not in the scale of your land, but in the efficiency of your containers. You've mastered the hidden mechanics of survival. Now the only limit to your harvest is the number of lids you're willing to open.